Hello and welcome to Something Z. Before this video gets started, I just wanted to say this is actually my late anniversary video. Woo! So if you don't want to hear me be mushy, then jump to this part in the video. I can't wait to see you there. Okay, so if you're still here, I just wanted to say thank you so much for sticking by and joining the channel. Even if I haven't had the best upload schedule this year, I can say that this channel and everyone even deciding to watch means the world to me. So thank you. I hope to do this for at least one more year. Okay, enough gushy mush. Let's jump into the video. Hello and welcome to Something Z, and welcome to What If Deku Had Returned by Death. And because there's nothing to say, let's jump into the video in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so we begin this what if when Izuku's teacher asked the class who wanted to be in the hero course. And we start here because everything up to this point has been the exact same as in the canon, with Izuku being quirkless and Bakugo bullying him. And anyways, when the class heard this, they all began to raise their hands. And when Bakugo saw this, he began to laugh at them, saying that they could never become heroes, and at best they would be some D-less sidekicks. Then before he could say anything else, he noticed that Izuku's hand was up as well. And seeing this, Bakugo put his hand on Izuku's desk, and he exploded. And the explosion was so strong that it blasted Izuku to a nearby wall, and it knocked over Izuku's desk. Then when Izuku landed, Bakugo told Izuku that he was even more pathetic than the rest of the class, because unlike the rest of them, he's a quirkless nobody. Okay, so now we skip a couple hours, and just about everyone has gone home, except Izuku, who was in the classroom and he was writing down hero notes on the new hero Mount Lady. But right after Izuku was done, he was about to go leave. But before he was able to put his book away, Bakugo and his group of friends walked into the room, and they snatched Izuku's notebook out of his hands. Then when Izuku tried to grab it back, Bakugo exploded, then threw out the window. Then once the notebook was gone, Bakugo and his friends left. And when they left, Izuku ran out of the room and he began to look for the book. And after a couple minutes of searching, he was able to find it in the school fish pond, and it was being sucked on by a fish. Then once Izuku was able to dry the notebook enough, Izuku put the book into his bag, and he began to run home. And because he really just wanted to go home quickly, he decided to take a shortcut, so he eventually was able to make it to a bridge. But when he got halfway across, Izuku noticed that a nearby sewer grate was beginning to shake. Then after a couple shakes, the grate got completely launched into the air, making it land next to the hole. Then crawling out of it appeared a villain completely made out of sludge. Then once the villain was completely freed, it began to search the area. Then after a couple seconds of looking, it spotted Izuku. And when it saw Izuku, it sped towards him. And before he was able to get away, the sludge villain was able to catch up to him. And when he got to him, he began to engulf Izuku into his body, with the sludge villain forcefully filling Izuku's mouth with sludge. And after a couple seconds, Izuku began to fade in and out of consciousness. Then for a final second, before he faded, he was able to see a silhouette jump from the sewer hole. But before the silhouette was able to do anything to help Izuku saw pure black, with him dying. Then after a couple seconds, Izuku saw a bright light through his eyelids, so he opened his eyes, with him having to blink a couple times to get adjusted to the light. Then after he was able to see, he found himself at his desk. And confused about what was going on, he looked at the clock. And when he saw it, he saw that it wasn't even before the bell had rung yet. And seeing this, Izuku chalked up everything he saw as a weird, very vivid dream. But as the day passed, more and more things he remembered from the dream happened, with him experiencing the very terrible deja vu, such as his teacher asking who wanted to join the hero course, Bakugo launching him into a wall, and Bakugo throwing his notebook out the window, telling him to take a swan dive off the roof. And when Izuku grabbed the notebook, he knew what was going to happen next, and he didn't really want to die again. But Izuku's curiosity of what would happen to him was too strong for him, so he eventually ended up back under the bridge. And just like before, the sludge villain appeared from the sewers. And seeing this, Izuku, who was prepared this time, began to run, with him quickly getting caught by the villain, with him getting captured and suffocated by the villain, with him losing all of his air after less than a minute, and Izuku's perspective began to go all black, and Izuku heard a loud, high-pitched ringing in his ears. But just as fast as the sound had completely filled Izuku's ears, so too as it ended, was Izuku's vision going completely black. Then after a couple seconds, Izuku found himself back at his desk, with Izuku taking in giant breaths of fresh air, panting loudly, which made his classmates stare for a bit before they lost interest. So Izuku then went back to his day, knowing everything that would happen. And when Izuku eventually got to the point where Bakugo had slammed Izuku into the wall, he told Izuku that he was a pathetic, quirkless loser. But when Izuku heard this, he smiled, and he began to say that he was wrong, and that But before Izuku could finish his sentence, the whole classroom began to go completely still, with time stopping, and only Izuku being able to move his eyes. And after a couple seconds, black smoke began to fill in the room, with it drifting towards Izuku. And when the smoke got to him, it turned into a hand, and then the hand began to move around, with eventually going inside of him, and it felt as if it was caressing his heart, until he eventually felt a huge amount of pain. Then once the pain appeared, it disappeared, and once it was gone, time went back to normal, with Izuku breathing heavily, and his eyes were wide open with his face covered in fear. And seeing this, Bakugo began to laugh, saying that if he was a coward, then he has no right to be a hero. Okay, so now we skip to when the school day ended, and when it did, Izuku called the police, saying that the villain had attacked, and he was currently under the bridge. And hearing this, the operator sent officers and some pro-heroes to take care of the villain. And while this was going on, Izuku began to walk home, with him taking a different route so he doesn't get caught in the middle of the fight. Okay, so now we skip 20 minutes, and Zuko's currently sitting on his couch, and he was wondering to himself what he should even do. And he was asking, even with all this power, does he even still have a chance to be a hero? And the reason he was questioning it this much was yes, he wanted to be a hero, but he remembered the pain and how it felt to die, the ringing and silence in his ears. But what scared Zuko to his core was the misty hand that caused him pain, and he was scared that if he kept using his power, he would go mad. But while Zuko was in that line of thinking, the news came back on. And when it did, the main story that was playing was All Might talking to a reporter, while multiple pro heroes were in the background collecting sludge and putting it into the back of a police car. And the reporter just asked All Might how they were able to catch the villain with such ease. And All Might, smiling, said that someone reported the crime, which led to these chain of events. And he tells the reporter that yes, he is the pro hero, but the person who called was the true hero. And hearing this, Zuko smirked, and he decided that he was going to be a hero, because he remembered that a true hero will save people no matter the sacrifice. So he decided that it doesn't matter if he has to go a bit mad, he will save people. So the next day, Zuko began to train with him doing workouts in the gym and at home, and he began to join different fighting schools, for example boxing, karate, and sword fighting, with him around 4 months later looking fit and athletic. And because he was doing all of this training, he didn't rely heavily on his ability to come back to life, with the last time he died being the sludge villain. But after Zuko got his green belt, Zuko decided to up his training even more, so he went to a nearby beach that was known for having mountains of trash, and after he did some looking around, he found an old police radio that was thrown out to get replaced. And while he was leaving the beach, he saw a strong looking blonde haired guy getting trained by someone who looked like a skeleton. And when Zuko got home, he repaired it, and he put it back online. And with that, he was able to listen to crimes. And after around an hour of waiting, a police on the comm reported that there was a small amount of crooks that had just robbed a small shop, and they were running on foot. And for Zuko, it was about 3 blocks away. And hearing this, Zuko quickly put on his workout gear, which were black leggings and a hoodie. Then he put on a makeshift mask that he just made, which sort of looks like the black version of his original mask that he wore, but it was a bit more janky and there were small spots of green across the entire outfit. Then he grabbed a small switchblade, which he had in his desk. Then once Zuko was ready, Zuko jumped out of his window and he grabbed onto a nearby pipe. Then he began to slide all the way down, and when he got down, he began to run, with him running through alleys in order to spot them. And eventually, after a couple minutes, he sees around 4 thugs, with them all carrying items that had tags on them, with the man at the front having a bag that had money clearly visible. And seeing this, Zuko told the 4 to stop, but then the second he said that, the 4 guys rushed at him, and one of them stabbed him with a knife, while Zuko was distracted fighting the other goons. And when Zuko got stabbed, he fell to the ground and he began to bleed out. And seeing Zuko began to die, they ran off. And Zuko began to hear ringing until it eventually went black, and he found himself back at his room. So being prepared this time, Zuko arrived at the alley, and he began to prepare, with him going to a fire escape that was on a nearby building. And when the 4 goons appeared, Zuko jumped down, and he immediately took out the guy with a knife before they had time to react. And with that, the remaining 3 thieves began to fight Zuko. But with him being prepared this time, he was able to hold his own pretty well, and eventually he was able to knock the thieves out. But while Zuko was trying to get his breath back, a cop car appeared at the end of the alley, and a cop ran out with a gun in hand, and he told Zuko to get on the ground and put his hands up. And seeing this, Zuko began to panic, because he didn't want to get in trouble because that could mess up his chances of getting into UA. So he pulled out the pocket knife he had in his pocket, and everything went black. And when Zuko saw the light, he found himself back in his room. And when he was ready, he immediately jumped out the window, and he returned back to the place. And when he got to the place, not only did he get in place, he found a place for him to be able to hide when the cops appeared. So once the thieves arrived, Zuko jumped down and knocked the knife wielder out, and he began to fight the group of people, with him now even being faster than he was before, thanks to him now knowing how they fought. And right when Zuko knocked them out, Zuko began to climb the fire escape, and he used it to help him get to the roof of the building. And once Zuko was hidden, police officers arrived, and when they found the thieves on the ground, they arrested them, and they took them away. And when they left, Zuko climbed down and began to walk home. And while he was walking, he was thinking that he should do that more often. And while he was walking home, he was thinking, he should probably do that more often. Okay, I'm sorry I rambled on for a bit too long, but basically, in short, Zuko spends his time fighting villains, and in the process, he gets better and smarter at fighting. And whenever he gets caught, he ends a loop, with him going back to his previous checkpoint, with him getting decently known around his city, with him being known as some mass vigilante that no one actually knows. Okay, so anyways, we skip to the day of the UA entrance exams, and the day before the event, Zuko asked the school if he could bring a knife or 2 because he's quirkless to the exams, which they agreed to as long as he shows them to them before the exams. So what Zuko has on him on the day of the exam is a sword on his back and a few kunais which were in a pouch on his leg. And currently, Zuko is at the front gates of UA, and after taking a giant gulp of air, Zuko began to walk towards the school, ready to take on any challenge. Then he tripped on a rock after taking 3 steps. But before he could give a kiss to the ground, he felt a hand touch his bag. And when the hand made contact, Zuko began to lose speed, with him eventually stopping completely in midair. and seeing this, Izuku looked behind him, and when he did, he saw a girl with brown hair. Then after Izuku stopped falling, the girl readjusted Izuku, and she eventually gave him weight again, with him landing on his feet. And when he was back to normal, the two began to talk for a bit. But after a couple minutes, the girl walked away and she went into the gymnasium. And seeing this, Izuku went to get his gear signed in. And once he was done with that, he went into the gymnasium as well. Then after he got in, President Mike walked into the room, and he began to explain the rules for the first and the second phase of the exams. Then once he was done, he gave out the test to all the examinees. Okay, so now we skip a couple hours, and currently, Izuku and everyone else that was able to pass the written exams were waiting outside a fake city. And while Izuku was waiting, he began to try to think of a plan for what he should do during the test. But while he was in mid-thought, a guy with glasses that he recognized from earlier, while President Mike was explaining the rules, walked over to him, and he asked Izuku if he knew that weapons were prohibited. And hearing this, Izuku got out of his thought, and he pulled out the slip he got from the reception, and he showed it to Ida. And when he did that, he told him that he needs his gear, because otherwise he's useless, especially on the fact that he's quirkless. And hearing this, Ida began to apologize. But before he could finish, President Mike appeared on top of a tower, and he shouted at the examinees saying that the next phase begins now, because in the real world, there are no countdowns. Then once he said that, giant doors leading to the fake city opened. And when the doors opened, everyone began to run through, with Izuku being one of the first people through, with him being somewhat close to Ida. And when Izuku ran into the city, he began to attack the robots by slashing at them with his blades. So when there was around 10 minutes before the exams ended, Izuku had around 40 robot points. The examiners released the 0-pointers, so giant robots came out from the ground, and they began to destroy the fake city as they moved. And seeing this, many of the examinees began to run. However, Izuku stayed where he was, and he destroyed some nearby robots, getting some extra points, using the fact that everyone else was running away to his advantage. But after a bit of time, Izuku was going to run away. But before he was able to leave, he heard someone yell from pain. And when Izuku looked behind him, he saw the girl that stopped him from falling earlier, but she currently had rubble on her leg, and she wasn't able to escape. And the 0-pointer was currently getting closer and closer to her. And seeing this, Izuku ran to her, and he began to lift the rubble off of her, getting rid of the semi-heaviest rocks first, then eventually pushing the rest off of her. Then after she was mostly free, Izuku just pulled her out, releasing her. And with the robot coming closer to them, and with her being unable to walk, Izuku picked her up, and he began to run away. And after around a minute of running, Izuku put her down, because they were a safe distance away. And when Izuku put her down, the examiners announced that the exams are now officially over, and that if you were injured, go to Recovery Girl's office to get healed, otherwise leave. So hearing this, the two split up, with Izuku going home. Okay, so now we skip a couple days, and Izuku just got his letter. And seeing this, Izuku went into his room and he opened it up. And when he opened it, All Might from a projector appeared, and he told Izuku that he was able to pass, because not only was he able to get 52 robot points, but he was also able to get 24 rescue points from saving the girl. And with that, he was able to get a total of 76 points, which was enough to allow Izuku to pass. And when he was done with his speech, All Might welcomed Izuku into UA. Okay, so now we skip a couple more days, and Izuku is currently standing outside the doors of Class 1A. And after Izuku took a deep breath, he opened the doors and he went inside. And when he did, the first thing he saw was the guy with glasses and Bakugo arguing about Bakugo having his legs on his desk. And when the two noticed him, the guy with glasses sped towards Izuku, and he introduced himself as Tenya Ida. Then after some talking, someone appeared behind Izuku, and when he turned around, he saw that it was the girl from the exams, who introduced herself as Ochako. And after they did their introduction for a couple minutes, Izuku and the people in the classroom noticed a sleeping bag in the doorway. And seeing this, everyone quieted down. Then after the room went silent, a man started to crawl out of the bag. And when he was standing up, he said that it took them way too long for them to get quiet, and that they will have to work on that as time goes on. And when he was standing up completely, he told the class that he was their teacher. Then once he said that, he told the class to get changed into their PE clothes, and then to meet him in the field outside. Okay, so now we skip to when the class was all outside. And when Aizawa was sure everyone was at the field, he gave Bakugo a ball, and he told him to use his quirk to throw the ball as far as he could. And once Bakugo heard this, he pulled back, and he threw the ball using an explosion to propel the ball even further. And when the ball hit the ground, a number appeared on Aizawa's phone. And when Aizawa showed the class, the number that appeared was 705.2 meters. Then he told the class that UA can only accept the best of the best, and because of that they will be doing a test, and the person that gets the last place will be expelled from the school. And once he said that, the test began. Okay, so the first test was a 50-meter dash, with Bakugo and Izuku going, and after the timer went off, they started, with Izuku getting 4 seconds. Then for the sandbox, Izuku sped towards the box, and with his increased agility, he was able to get over the sandbox just barely. And the test went on, with Izuku getting a decent score around all of them. So now it's time for the ball throw. And when it was Izuku's turn, Izuku tried to throw it to the best of his abilities. So after it flew for some time, a number appeared on Aizawa's phone, which was around 160 feet. Then once the ball throws were over, Aizawa began to calculate the tallies. Then once he was done, he showed them on a giant board. And after some looking, Izuku found his name somewhere in the middle, with in last place being Mineta. And when Mineta saw that he was in last, he was stunned, and he began to cry and plead for him to not get kicked out. But after some time, Aizawa threw a scarf at Mineta, and he wrapped him up in it. Then he dragged Mineta to the principal's office, and he was never seen again after that day. Okay, so now skip to the next day, and when it was time for class, the class was surprised when instead of Aizawa walking into the room, it was All Might in a Silver Age outfit. And after the shock that All Might was in their classroom was gone, All Might told the class that he will be doing their first hero exercise today, and that after they get dressed in the hero outfits, they should meet him at ground beta. Okay, so now it's time for me to explain Izuku's hero outfit. Basically, it's Izuku's original hero outfit, but it's a lot slimmer, because Izuku cares a lot more about being able to move rather than defense, and the color palette is swapped. So it's primarily black with there being green lines across the outfit. And for his mask, the rabbit ears are still there, but he has a full mask on. And where his mouth is, there's a giant design of a smile. Then on his back, there's a place for his big sword. Then on his belt, there are many holders for his other weapons, which includes throwing knives and shurikens. Okay, so now we jump back, and when All Might saw that everyone was in their hero outfits, he began to tell them the exercise, which was a hero versus villains raid. And when he was done explaining the rules, he sorted everyone into teams of 2. Then he pulled the teams that were going against each other. And when it was all done, it was Izuku and Ochako on the team of heroes, against Bakugo and Ida who were villains. Then once the names were revealed, Bakugo and Ida went inside the building to hide the fake bomb, while Izuku and Ochako began to try to think of a plan, while the rest of the class went to some other area to spectate. Okay, so now we skip to when the exercise was about to begin. And when All Might told them to, Izuku and Ochako ran into the building, and they began to run through a hallway. But after a bit of time, they got to multiple hallways. And before they were able to realize, Bakugo jumped out from a corner, and he fired an explosion. But Izuku was able to react in time, so he was able to move him and Ochako out of the way, with the only damage taken being Izuku's mask and parts of Izuku's arm. And when Izuku was standing up, he told Ochako to go, and that he will meet up with her later. And hearing this, she nodded and she began to run away. But seeing this, Bakugo went in for an explosion to stop her. But before he was able to, Izuku was able to get back to his feet and he kicked Bakugo in the gut, which made him miss the attack and slam against a wall. And with that, Ochako was able to get away. And when the two were ready, Bakugo and Izuku began to fight, with Izuku having the upper hand when it came to close quarters combat. So Izuku spent his time trying to get close to Bakugo, while Bakugo tried to keep his distance using his explosions to attack Izuku. But eventually, Izuku was able to get too close, so he was able to grab Bakugo by the arm, and he used that to pin him to the ground. And thinking that he had won, Izuku tried to wrap Bakugo up with tape, but before he was able to, Bakugo fired an explosion, launching Izuku away. And when Bakugo was standing up, he began to go for a pin that was on his glove, and he pointed it towards Izuku. But when he got close to the pin, All Might and his speakers told him not to pull it, and that if he pulled it, Izuku could die. But hearing this, Bakugo just began to laugh, and once he pulled the pin, a massive explosion erupted from Bakugo's glove, filling the entire hallway they were standing in. And after a couple seconds, it reached Izuku, blowing him away as well. And after a few seconds, dirt and dust began to slow down, so the area was becoming a bit more visible. And when Bakugo was able to see again, he saw Izuku on the ground and he seemed to be unconscious. And seeing this, Bakugo began to walk towards Izuku. But when he was a foot away, Izuku quickly opened his eyes and he jumped to his feet, and he began to try to fight Bakugo. But he was slower now than he was before, because Izuku was heavily burned from a blast. And with him being slower, Bakugo was able to get the upper hand, and he was able to pin Izuku down. And with Izuku being too injured and tired, he was unable to get back up. So after some time, the timer went off, with Ochako and Ida in the room with the bomb, with Ida being able to bring the bomb away from Ochako whenever she got too close. So anyway, when the timer went off, All Might appeared on the speakers, and he said that the villain team had won. And once he said that, robots took Izuku to Recovery Girl to get healed. Meanwhile, Ida, Ochako, and Bakugo left to return to the rest of the group. And that's when we're gonna leave the what if. And just to be clear, this is a one-shot, and I refuse to do this again. I just blatantly refuse. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this special, and I hope to see you next time on Something Z.